Today's project was donated to my sister by one of her neighbors, which is a nice way of saying it was on its way to the curb to the trash. I was so curious what was underneath all this white paint, and I can't wait to share what I found. I'm also sharing a new to me stain color, an all-in-one paint, easy wipe on, wipe off. Anybody can do this. I'm Denise from Salvaged Inspirations. Welcome back to my DIY furniture painting channel. Let's get started. Here's a better look at the table Andrea's neighbor was going to throw away. Again, she generously offered it to my sister for me to work on, which was super sweet. And I have to say, these Gateleg tables are awesome. They just don't build furniture like this anymore. This table had been painted white, and I was super curious what was underneath this paint. So I started by laying a drop cloth on the floor because this table was filthy. It was sitting in front of my sister's neighbor's garage for days, and I don't know where it was prior to that. But this table really needed a very good cleaning. Using my white lightning, which I like mixing in this spray bottle, which I get from Home Depot, I went ahead and started spraying this whole table down, including the top, the legs, the underneath, etc., and just let a lot of the dirt just drip off this piece. Then using a large automotive sponge, I started wiping back this table in sections. And I started with the top, I moved to the underneath, did the legs, the carriage of this table. And I must have cleaned it, I think 3 times. It could have been 4, I lost count. This Gateleg table has plenty of turned legs. They're just beautiful. They have so much character and design. But I made sure that I got into all the little nooks and crannies while cleaning them up as well. Once the table was 100% clean, I let it dry overnight. I came back the next morning and propped this table on its top and removed all the hardware hinges. This took a little bit of effort because the hinges had been painted over. Some of them were stripped, some of them were really stuck on there with the paint, but I just took my time and worked my way around the table. In a bit, I'll explain a really easy way to remove all this stuck-on paint from these hinges. Once I had the tabletop separated, the leaf from the actual top of it, I brought it into my sanding room and brought out my carbide scraper. I love this tool. I've used it for numerous makeovers, and most of the time it works awesome. For some reason on this table, the paint just didn't want to scrape off. So I brought out my orbital sander, my Bosch sander, and I put on a very aggressive grit 80, and I started sanding this top down. And the sander did an awesome job. It really did. It just ate through that paint and revealed a really beautiful wood. There's walnut under here, and it was in really good shape and had a lovely, lovely grain. I also wanted to point out that with an orbital sander, you can get into nooks and crannies really nicely. I know it looks awkward because it's round, but here I'm demoing how I went in and I ate through all that paint on the lip of this table. And it works, like I said, really well. It just gets in there into all those nooks and crannies if you just use the side of the sander. You do have to control it. So, it might take you a time or 2 before you feel that you have full control into getting into smaller areas. But once you do, it can do wonderful things. You don't have to swap out for another sander. You also don't have to buy a really, really costly sander kit, with the sponges and everything. This works very nicely, as you can see. And for the little areas that the sander did not get, this is where the carbide scraper did wonders. I don't know why it didn't want to take it off the top, but for the sides and these little nooks and crannies here, that carbide scraper got right in there and scraped off all this white paint. And if any of you are interested in the carbide scraper or the Bosch sander that I use, or any of the tools and or products that I use in my videos, I will have them all linked in the description box down below for you. I worked my way around all three pieces of this tabletop until all the white paint was sanded off. And to get the smoothest finish and get all this paint removed, I started with the 80 grit sandpaper, then I went to a 120 grit, and then I finished with a 220 grit sandpaper for a super smooth finish. And here's a little tip. If you ever have any bits of paint that are embedded into the wood grain, a dental pick tool, which is super inexpensive on Amazon, or a very large safety pin works really well to dig that paint out of the grain. I really like the dental pick. I find that it's gentle. You don't want to obviously dig into the wood. You just want to get that paint, that embedded paint out, and the dental pick can be very effective with a light touch. After the entire top was sanded down, I decided to bring it back into my workshop and remove the hinges and the screws that were holding the legs to this tabletop. This took a while. Again, I had a problem because some of the screws were really stuck into this paint. But check this out. Once I actually did get the legs off, this is a gibbered walnut table. This wood is awesome. And Gibbard Furniture, they closed, I believe it was in 2009, 2010, somewhere's in there. And the closure marked the end of 183 years of producing furniture here in Canada. So they really make quality pieces, mahogany, walnut, cherry, and I'm guessing this table is probably at least 50 years old. So while I was at removing all this excess paint, I decided to go ahead and remove the gate legs that swing out just so I could clean them up and clean up the hinges and hardware as well. They were stripped. I kind of wish I had not. I ended up using my Speed Out titanium kit, and this is great for stripped screws. This case comes with different sized bits, and you just insert it. If you have a drill or impactor, you just insert the drill. There's one side that actually drills in a groove into the strip screw, and then you exchange it to the other side and it pulls it out. So it's easy to use. And again, if you've ever had this problem and you've been frustrated, because it is frustrating, if you're interested, I will leave the link in the description box down below for you to give it a whirl. So now for the fun part. I wanted to see what color stain I would like to use. And I brought out my Dixie Belle Voodoo Gel Stain, which this is water-based. It is not an oil-based stain. It's water-based, so super easy to use. Both these colors were new to me, Charred Hickory and Whiskey Barrel. So I tried them both on the back side of this wood table, and I decided on Charred Hickory. This water-based stain is so easy to use. I brought out a large 3-inch foam brush. I applied some of this water-based gel stain onto the foam and just started wiping it on. I do suggest that whatever you use, whether it's, and I'll show you another applicator pad that I ended up using as well, whether you're using a foam brush, an applicator pad, a lint-free rag, a chip brush, it doesn't matter what you use, but I do suggest that you add it onto your applicator tool rather than directly onto the wood, because I have squirted some of this gel stain directly onto the wood, and if you don't wipe it back quickly enough, it will leave the mark where you actually applied it. Not in all cases, it really does depend on the wood, but why take the chance? So this 3-inch foam brush worked awesome for the flat surfaces, but not so much for the scalloped edges. So I ended up swapping it out for another applicator sponge. And again, applying this couldn't be more simple. It is seriously just wipe on and wipe off any excess. There's no odor, the no fumes. It's easy cleanup. It's a great product, and I'll be the first to admit that I always think that a water-based stain is not going to give wood as rich of a stain or depth to the stain as a water-based will. I'm wrong. I have to say I'm wrong because just wait until you see this table all done with one coat. I only applied one coat of this water-based stain and then I top coated. But once you see this finished table, I'll be really curious to hear what you think. So I let the stain dry overnight, although it does not need that long at all. It is water-based, it dries very quickly. I came back the next morning and I top coated and I poured some gator hide onto a paper plate and used this blue applicator sponge to apply it. And again, this is very simple to use. It's just a wipe on. So I dip the sponge into the gator hide and I go ahead and wipe it on to the stained wood. This top coat is also water-based and it does not take long to dry. I usually give it between 2 hours, maybe 3 hours in between each coat. And then using a 220 sanding sponge, I give it a really light once over, very, very, very light-handed, just to knock down any unevenness or raised wood grain. I wipe up any dust with a cloth and then it's ready for its next coat. And I just repeat the process. Once that coat is dry, it gets a really light sanding, and then I remove the dust. I applied 3 coats of gator hide top coat to this tabletop, and the 3rd coat I do not sand. While I was waiting for the top coat to dry in between coats, I ended up bringing the legs, the base, into my sanding room and started to tackle those legs. My goal wasn't to totally strip these turned legs of the white paint, but I did want to get all of the flaking paint off. So I started by using a 220 grit sanding pad and sanded off a bunch of the flaking paint. The carbide scraper also came in handy for where the paint was a little thicker or where there were drip marks. I scraped that off using the carbide scraper. And once the paint was totally smooth by the hand sanding on the legs, I ended up taking my orbital sander and sanding off the paint from all the flat surfaces as well. So this process removed all the flaking paint that was on this piece, and the paint that is adhered 100% is all smoothed out. I wanted this table to have a very classic look, so I ended up choosing the paint color Umber, which is a beautiful, rich brown black. I applied it to these legs using my slap-on technique, which I will include a full video of that in the description box down below as well. And this is just where I take a quality paintbrush, I add a little bit of paint onto the tips, and I paint these spindles from side to side, not up and down. And you could do it fast, or that's where I call it the slap-on technique. But this is a way to paint rounded spindles or chair handles or chair legs very quickly, number 1, and number 2, with no brush marks. This will leave 0 brush marks on these spindles. It's a beautiful smooth finish that you get by doing it this way, and it's a lot of fun. I worked my way around all these legs. Another point I want to bring up with this slap it on technique is don't use a lot of paint because it's going to fling all over the place. Believe me, I've made that mistake. So you just want a tiny little bit of paint on the tip of that brush, and then you can go side to side and do these legs beautifully. However, the first coat always looks terrible. This paint in Umber is an all-in-one paint, so it has the primer, paint, and top coat included. I did not need to use a primer, but the first coat didn't look good. It's the second coat where all the magic happens. The first coat, I had some of the white still beating through, the white paint underneath. It looked a little bit darker where the white had flaked off or was sanded off. So yeah, just trust the process. And your second coat, always, that's where the magic happens. You just kind of got to trust the process and go with it. I painted 2 coats of Umber onto the legs, onto the base. And while I was waiting for the paint to dry, I started dealing with all this hardware, all this white paint stuck on there. I used an old pot. I added some water and the tiniest little bit of vinegar, and I boiled them. I just boiled them on the stove until they were boiling, left them in there for a couple of minutes, and then brought it back downstairs and used a putty knife to scrape off all this paint. Not that anybody really sees this hardware. I mean, it's not on display. It's underneath the table. But I figured, you know, the table is looking good. Might as well make the hardware match. I ended up bringing out some black gilding wax. I thought it would turn the hardware a little black, but it didn't. Instead, it cleaned it up. It was the oddest thing. There was a little bit of rust, and this gilding wax just kind of buffed everything up and cleaned it up really nicely. So I put this table all back together again, made sure everything was working properly. This simple design is so great. They don't make furniture like this anymore. And it was time to bring it upstairs and stage in style. And just as a reminder, here's the before. And here's the after. I'm so happy that there was beautiful wood underneath all that white paint. And I'm so curious to hear what you think of this charred hickory water-based stain. I hope you enjoyed today's project as much as I enjoyed doing it. This Gateleg table has a new lease on life. It's ready for some heavy duty use, and I think it looks fabulous. I can't wait to hear what you think of this makeover. Please feel free to leave a comment down below. I love reading every single one of them. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so and hit that notification bell so you're notified every time a new project comes out. Until next time, have a fabulous day. Bye, guys.